It's Wednesday, March 18th, 2026. It's the Jews update. More confirmation the Jews are actually really good at war, and more proof left-wingers and Islamists have almost everything in common. Next on the AM update. Former congressional candidate in Washington state turned director of National Counterterrorism Center, Joe Kent, turned in his resignation letter yesterday, addressed to the President of the United States. Here's what he said, and I want to read this letter in full because I think it's important for you to hear it all. Here is what Joe Kent, the now former director of National Counterterrorism Center, said in his resignation letter, quote, President Trump, after much reflection, I have decided to resign from my position as the director of National Counterterrorism Center. Effective today, I cannot, in good conscience, support the ongoing war in Iran. Iran posed no imminent threat to our nation, and it is clear that we started this war due to pressure from Israel and its powerful American lobby. Ding, number one. I support the values and foreign policies that you campaigned on in 2016, 2020, 2024, which you enacted in your first term. Until June of 2025, you understand that wars in the Middle East were a trap that robbed America of the precious lives of our patriots and depleted the wealth and prosperity of our nation. In your first administration, you understood better than any modern president how to decisively apply military power without getting us drawn into never-ending wars. You demonstrated this by killing Qassam Soleimani and by defeating ISIS. Early on in this administration, high-ranking Israeli, ding number two, high-ranking Israeli officials and influential members of the American media deployed a misinformation campaign that wholly undermined your America First platform and sowed pro-war sentiments to encourage a war with Iran. This echo chamber was used to deceive you into believing that Iran posed an imminent threat to the United States and that you should strike now. There was a clear path to swift victory. This was a lie and is the same tactic the Israelis, ding number three, the Israelis used to draw us into the disastrous Iraq war that cost our nation the lives of thousands of our best men and women. We cannot make that mistake again. As a veteran who deployed to combat 11 times, and as a Gold Star husband who lost my beloved wife Shannon in a war manufactured by Israel, ding number five, I cannot support sending the next generation off to fight and die in a war that serves no benefit to the American people nor justifies the cost of American lives. I pray you will reflect upon what we are doing in Iran and who we are doing it for. Ding number six. The time for bold action is now. You can reverse course and chart a new path for our nation, or you can allow us to slip further towards decline and chaos. You hold the cards. That is the resignation letter from Joe Kent, the now former director of the National Counterterrorism Center, counting no less than five, probably six times in that resignation letter, saying it's the Jews' fault for us going to war with Iran. Now, this individual, Joe Kent, has been on the record numerous times, and I mean numerous times in the past, with very pro-Israel, anti-Iran sentiments. In 2024, he praised the IDF for their attacks, condemned attacks on Israel, and criticized Joe Biden's leadership when it came to Israel. So that's one thing. Another is this as well. In 2024, Joe Kent also strongly backed funding Israel, which he, of course, you just heard, accused of manufacturing the war that led to his wife's 2019 death and deceiving Trump into bombing Iran. Now, unfortunately, Joe Kent, his wife, his former wife, was killed by ISIS. There is some broad conspiracy theory that I had not heard about until yesterday that somehow Israel all this time was secretly controlling ISIS. You're allowed to change your opinions. Heck, you're even allowed to change your opinions on Israel from a national security, public policy standpoint. I have no problem with in 2012, 2019, 2022 saying, yeah, we should keep giving aid to Israel. And then in 2026 saying, I just think we should cut off all foreign aid. All foreign aid. Now, I have no problem with that. But when you repeatedly run tropes like you heard no less than 5 times in that resignation letter, you're opening yourself up to the possibility that maybe you're not on the up and up whatsoever. Maybe you're not on the up and up. So that's pretty interesting, don't you think? Joe Kent, the now former director of the National Counterterrorism Center. And there's also this as well. you were running the Counterterrorism Center. The Counterterrorism Center. The Against Terrorism Center. Iran, the number one state sponsor of terror on the face of the planet. Now, work with me here. Listen to me here. Counterterrorism Center, National Counterterrorism Center. Iran, number one state sponsor of terrorism on the face of the planet. I agree, you probably knew more about counterterrorism and terror cells and who's funding them than anybody else, probably. Don't you think you could have spent the last 12 months? Don't you think you could have spent the last 18 months or 7 months, however long you've been in that post, sounding the alarm bell, saying, hey guys, we totally got it wrong on Iran. They're really not the number one state sponsor of terror. They really pose no imminent threat. Don't you think you could have made that claim any time in the last better part of a year? Don't you think you could have been pounding that drum for the better part of the last year? Shrieking to anyone who will listen to you as the director of the National Counterterrorism Center, instead of waiting nearly 3 weeks into a war with Iran? To me, that just smacks of opportunism and not exactly courageousness. I will say this as well. I think two things can be absolutely true at the same time. Joe Kent is a veteran, served in combat honorably, as far as I'm concerned. I have no problem honoring that aspect of his service and completely criticizing what seems to stink to high heaven in this latest escapade. President Trump smells a rat as well. Here he is at the White House yesterday.
He just resigned today. He said he can't support your conflict with Iran. What's your reaction to that? And did you?
Well, I read his statement. I always thought he was a nice guy, but I always thought he was weak on security, very weak on security.
You probably shouldn't have put him in that position to begin with, Mr. President. All due respect.
I didn't know him well, but I thought he seemed like a pretty nice guy. But when I read his statement, I realized that it's a good thing that he's out, because he said that Iran was not a threat. Iran was a threat. Every country realized what a threat Iran was. The question is whether or not they wanted to do something about it. And many people, many of the greatest military scholars are saying for years that president should have taken out Iran because they wanted a nuclear weapon. They were, if we didn't do the attack, or if I'll go a step further, if I didn't terminate the Iran nuclear deal given to us, one of the worst deals ever made by Barack Hussein Obama. Remember when they sent Boeing 757s over there loaded with cash? Hundreds of millions of dollars. You would have been very happy. This was a wonderful. They said hundreds of millions. People forget.
So President Trump again saying that he differs with Joe Kent. Nice guy. Never thought he was great on security. Probably shouldn't have appointed him as National Counterterrorism Center Director, but that's neither here nor there. Actually, it's pretty much everywhere when it comes to this story. And you heard him say this as well. And I saw this trope brought up a ton yesterday, that Iran was not a threat, disagreeing with that. I saw a lot of people saying, well, why did Caroline Leavitt just say last week Iran is not a threat? She was responding to that ABC News story we told you about, and I originally cast doubts on that story as well before the White House even came out and asked for a retraction. She was responding to a very specific story about a very specific drone threat in a very specific part of this country, not the overall general threat that a nuclear Iran poses. That's just a fact. And that trope was dragged out yesterday in the midst of Joe Kent's resignation. Just an utter stupid. It's one of the stupidest developments in the what's left of right-wing America since the start of this war. And that's saying something, because the podcast wars are going on right now, and haven't gotten into that much on this podcast. But my goodness, I just want to drop this in here as well before the break. I just think it's interesting timing. Just interesting timing. I doubted this on Monday's episode. I've said as much publicly elsewhere as well. I don't believe Tucker Carlson. I don't think it really makes sense a ton for Tucker Carlson to be a foreign agent. But it is interesting. On Saturday evening, he claims the CIA is preparing a DOJ referral for him acting as a foreign agent. Then 3 days later, Joe Kent 5 times blames the Jews for trapping us into another Middle Eastern conflict. And by the way, if we're not out of there in the next month or so, my tenor is going to change quite a bit on this and everywhere else with what the heck are we doing? And could we not see this coming? But as for now, I'm still giving President Trump the benefit of the doubt. But there's Joe Kent, 3 days after Tucker Carlson claims the CIA spying on his texts or whatever, preparing a criminal referral. 3 days later, Joe Kent comes out, blames the Jews for getting us into another Middle Eastern war, and is probably going to be a guest on Tucker Carlson right after the second Alp Pouch live read later this week. I'm just saying that's kind of some interesting timing, don't you think? If, again, I'm just asking questions here. If both Tucker Carlson and Joe Kent are trying to get out ahead of something that involves them, that's very unseemly. It's interesting timing. I'm just going to leave it there. There's more I want to say that I'm just going to leave it there. Oh, and by the way, for all the talk about the Jews dragging us into another war, it seems like they're really good at this whole war thing. IDF announcing they took out Ali Liriani. That's basically their Secretary of War over there. He had been talking tough in recent days. Even walked the streets of Tehran a few days ago. He is dead now, along with, according to the IDF, a huge chunk of the security apparatus known as the Basij. It's not really a security apparatus. That's their street thugs in airstrikes carried out on Tuesday. So the Jews are really good at war. When we come back, another day that ends with why President Trump not happy with the NATO allies. Also, what's going on with the Save America Act? More tough talk from John Thune. Is that going to be enough to salvage the failure theater pretty much everybody is aware of now? We'll talk about that and more coming up next. More Trump's got jokes.
Well, I didn't know about your Italian roots either. I thought he was a super wasp. You know, to me, Mike was always a wasp. Now I learned that this is serious Italian stuff, right? Well, that'll be good for you, I think. You know,
President Trump,
his image has changed a hell of a lot.
Talking about House Speaker Mike Johnson not being aware that he actually has Italian roots, saying he always assumed Mike Johnson was a super wasp, white Anglo-Saxon Protestant. To be fair, that's all of us. There's Trump just pointing out the obvious. All of us thought that he was a wasp. All of us thought he was very waspy. Also, President Trump not happy with NATO allies, saying in a post on Truth Social, quote, United States has been informed by most of our NATO, quote-unquote, allies, he used the scare quotes there, they don't want to get involved with our military operation against the terrorist regime of Iran in the Middle East. This, despite the fact that almost every country strongly agreed with what we are doing and that Iran cannot in any way, shape, or form or be allowed to have a nuclear weapon. I'm not surprised by their action, however, because I always considered NATO, where we spend hundreds of billions of dollars per year protecting these same countries, to be a one-way street. He went on to say, quote, we do not need the help of anyone. Thank you for the attention in this matter. President Donald J. Trump. Maybe one of the most merciful and loving things we could do for Europe is pulling out of NATO. We'll see. Here's Senate Majority Leader John Thune on the Save America Act, which was debated in the Senate yesterday.
I think, as everybody knows, we are looking forward to having an important battle on the floor of the Senate this week on the Save America Act. And obviously, the message that came over from the House includes a couple of key components, one of which is that you have to prove citizenship to be able to register to vote in this country. And the second component is that you actually have to show an ID to vote in this country. We think those are both things that are overwhelmingly popular all across this country, no matter what your political party is. And to sort of illustrate, I think, how this issue is something that a lot of people resonate with and connect to, is the fact that pretty much everything you do in your daily life involves showing an ID. You know, whether it's opening a bank account, getting a hotel room, picking up prescription drugs. You need a card in many cases just to get into a library. I mean, these are things that are just basic, fundamental aspects of our everyday life. We certainly ought to be able to apply them to something as important as voting in this country.
So there is Senate Majority Leader John Thune. Some of his remarks in front of the press as the Senate debated on the floor the Save America Act. You'll hear from John Thune there a little bit more detail about the matter at hand, the Save America Act. He actually gets into why this makes sense, why we need it. And he does this, and a number of other senators I saw came out and basically said the same thing. You need an ID to do anything in life. Anything in life at all. Going to the library, getting a hotel room, picking up prescriptions, opening up a bank account. Why shouldn't you show ID to vote? Okay, so that's good messaging. That's good messaging. I still think that this is failure theater. I think it's failure theater. However, if it's going to be failure theater, make it actually theatrical. I'm not giving up on this. You'll understand why I'm very skeptical of figures like John Thune and other squish Republicans in the Senate. But I'm not giving up on this because there's still people like Mike Lee and a handful of senators who, if they are given the opportunity to exercise any form of parliamentary procedure to inflict pain on whomever they need to inflict pain on to get this thing closer to the finish line, I'm still holding out hope for them. However, if this is going to go down as the Republicans' latest version of failure theater, then let it be theatrical. And here's what I mean. Make sure you have the Republicans giving out that very common sense 80-20, 90-10 issue perspective, which is you have to have an ID to do simple things. You have to have an ID to do things as simple or less simple, like a library card, than voting. Make the Democrats vote against that. If you're going to do failure theater, do it right. See, this is how depressing Republicans are. I'm begging for them to do failure theater correctly. Maybe I need a couple days off. Funny, I am taking a couple days off. Let's end here. Caitlin Bennett, independent journalist, back again. She went out on the street asking lefties what they think about Islam versus MAGA. Listen to this.
More in common with a Trump supporter or a radical Islamist?
Radical Islamist.
You saw someone wearing one of those red hats chanting "Make America Great Again," or you saw someone shouting "Allahu Akbar" running down the breezeway here. Who would you feel more safe with?
The one shouting Allahu Akbar. Yeah.
You would support the radical Islamists.
Yeah.
What is it about Trump supporters that you don't think you'd get along with them so well?
I'm gay.
But you would get along with a radical Islamist?
Yes.
And you're gay?
Yes.
In solidarity with radical Islamists, would you look at the camera and say in solidarity, Allahu Akbar?
Allahu Akbar.
And would you say, "Make America Great Again" in solidarity with the Trump supporters?
No.
What is a bigger threat to America today, radical Islam or Trump supporters?
Trump supporters.
I'll say Trump.
Trump supporters in MAGA.
Yeah.
I would say Trump supporters and MAGA.
I would have to go with the Trump supporters.
Trump supporters, and MAGA.
Trump supporters and MAGA.
I'd say MAGA.
But we should be able to allow people to be who they are.
Yeah. Even if they're a radical Islamist.
Yes. Yeah. There's no right to judge them.
So if someone came running down the street, Allahu Akbar, or if there was someone on the opposite side saying, "Make America Great Again," got my red hat on, which side would you run to?
I don't know.
As Christians, and we're following Christ, do you think it's important to call out radical Islam?
No, because it's a freedom of religion.
Yeah, it's a freedom of religion.
How many terrorist attacks did Trump supporters engage in last week?
So many.
Just guess.
Thousands.
If you're a radical Islamist watching this right now, we pray for your conversion.
It's whatever they want to do, then do it. Whatever they want to do, then do it. Whatever they want to do, then do it. Whatever they
Independent journalist Caitlin Bennett with some more man and woman on the street interviews. In the midst of no fewer than, I think, 5 radical Islamist infused terror attacks in the West and at least 2 or 3 in the United States in recent memory. Seems like there were no fewer than a dozen voices you just heard there saying, I would rather go with the radical Islamist than the person wearing the MAGA hat. What was most hilarious, of course, was the lesbian who said, I'd rather go with the radical Islamist because I am gay. Stay away from tall buildings. That's going to be it for this week. Hope you have a wonderful spring break if you get it. I'm blessed to take a few days off. Going to spend some time with the family. As I'm recording this, it's 20 degrees. In about 48 hours, it's going to be 85 degrees. Hope you can enjoy some warm weather where you are as well. That's going to do it. Back at it again next week.